Brando will never be in this picture. That's what Paramount executives declared in 1971. They had good reason. Brando was box office poison, a string of flops, a reputation for being difficult, expensive, and unpredictable. However, what happened next didn't just save Marlon Brando's career. It created one of cinema's greatest performances and transformed how an entire culture saw itself on screen. This is the story of a screen test that changed everything. By 1971, Marlon Brando was Hollywood's cautionary tale, the actor who had revolutionized film acting in the 50s. With A Streetcar Named Desire and On the Waterfront, had become a liability. Mutiny on the Bounty was a disaster. The Chase, Reflections in a Golden Eye, Candy, flop after flop. Studios saw dollar signs flying away whenever Brando's name came up. And now Francis Ford Coppola wanted him for The Godfather. The Paramount executives were horrified. This wasn't just any movie. This was their big bet on Mario Puzo's best-selling novel about the Italian-American crime family. For decades, Hollywood had portrayed Italian-Americans as stereotypical gangsters or comic relief. The Godfather, on the other hand, had the potential to be different, complex, respectful. They couldn't afford to gamble on a has-been actor. Absolutely not, they said. Brando will never be in this picture. But Coppola believed he saw something the executives couldn't, that Don Vito Corleone wasn't just a character, but a patriarch who demanded the gravitas and magnetism that only Brando possessed. The young director fought back, meeting after meeting, argument after argument. Finally, the studio gave in, but with conditions designed to humiliate, conditions meant to make Brando walk away. First, he would have to audition. Marlon Brando, two-time Oscar winner, the method acting pioneer, would have to screen test like an unknown actor. Second, if cast, he would work for free, taking only a percentage of profits that the studio assumed would never materialize. Third, he would have to post a personal bond against any delays or disruptions he might cause. These weren't negotiations. They were insults wrapped as terms. The executives were certain Brando would refuse. They had underestimated both Brando's desperation and his genius. Coppola simply called Brando. Would he do a screen test? Sure, Brando said simply. So Francis Ford Coppola gathered a small crew and headed to Brando's house on Mulholland Drive. There's something magical about that winding road high above Los Angeles, a place where Hollywood legends have always retreated from the chaos below. Before they left, Coppola gave his crew specific instructions. Be respectful. Keep quiet. Brando didn't like loud noises. They brought along Italian meats, cheeses, expensive cigars, and various props for Brando to work with. When they arrived, Brando wasn't even awake yet, so Coppola used the time to carefully arrange the props, creating an atmosphere, setting a stage for whatever magic might happen. No elaborate studio setup, no costume department, no makeup artists, just a camera, some lights, carefully chosen props, and one of the greatest actors who ever lived. What happened next was pure instinct and brilliant character work. Brando looked around his house and started gathering props himself. He darkened his hair with shoe polish. He turned up his shirt collar. All those old guys, he explained to Coppola. The collar is always like that. He stuffed tissues in his cheeks to create jowls. Then came the masterstroke, the voice. As he began to speak in that now iconic whisper and rasp, Brando explained his reasoning. The Godfather would talk this way because he had been shot in the neck years before. The injury had changed his voice forever. Right there, In front of Coppola and his small crew, Marlon Brando transformed into Don Vito Corleone, not the flashy movie gangster of Hollywood tradition, but a wounded patriarch, a man of quiet power and infinite sadness, shaped by violence. Coppola kept the camera rolling, mesmerized. This wasn't just good acting. This was alchemy. Coppola took that tape back to Paramount. However, this wasn't a boardroom presentation to a group of executives. This was a private screening for one man, the CEO of Gulf and Western, the man with the ultimate power to say yes or no. Francis walked into his office and said simply, "I want to show you something." The room went quiet as the tape began to play. The CEO watched the transformation unfold, Brando becoming Corleone, explaining the character's backstory, finding the wounded patriarch's soul in real time. When it ended, this powerful executive, the same man who had declared Brando would never be in the picture, could only stare at the screen, his voice filled with amazement. "That's incredible. That is The Godfather." In that moment, he realized what Coppola had known all along, that Brando wasn't just right for the role, he was indispensable. No other actor could have created Don Vito Corleone with the depth, the wounded dignity, the tragic grandeur Brando brought to life in that improvised screen test. That test became the foundation for one of cinema's greatest performances. Brando's Don Vito Corleone was not just a character, he was a revolution in how Italian-Americans were portrayed on screen. Gone were the cartoonish stereotypes. In their place was dignity, complexity, and a tragic grandeur that elevated both the story and the culture it depicted. The Godfather became more than a movie. It became a cultural touchstone, reshaping not only how America saw Italian Americans, but how Italian Americans saw themselves. And it all began with an aging actor, some shoe polish, some cotton balls, transforming himself in his own living room. Marlon Brando had bet on himself one more time, and in doing so, he changed cinema forever.